Well, good evening. It's 5:30, so we'll make a start. And welcome to today's planning meeting of the 3rd of 2025 of March. I would like to welcome members of the public, councillors and officers to this meeting. Just before I start, a couple of announcements. Firstly, it's been a bit of a change of guard in the committee. Councillor Adam Billings has been my vice chair for a while now, and Councillor Mike Fox is now has just become the vice chair. So I just want to acknowledge the excellent work that Adam's done and helped me, as a vice chair in the planning committee. I've known Mike for 25 years, and I'm sure Mike will be as great a help to me as Adam has been. So I look forward to working with him. The second announcement is just a change in order, so we're going to do item 6 before item 5. But now I'd like to call upon the clerk, who will advise how the meeting will be run this afternoon.
Please note that we are live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees in person refrain from watching the live stream, as this will cause interference for our viewers. Please also ensure that your mobile phones and iPads are turned to silent. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of evacuation, please leave by the nearest exit and gather in the car park next to the library opposite Tesco. Should members of the public need to use the facilities, they are located through the doors to the right of the security guard. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by the chair. I have confirmed those entitled to speak. Please note that registered speakers are not permitted to approach committee members or distribute documentation to the committee during the course of this meeting. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The planning officer will present the submitted application and will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee. This will be taken in the following order. Speaker against, neighbourhood forum representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by speaker in the support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the planning officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, the chair will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, the chair will seek a proposer and a seconder for the application. The proposal must be in full and include all information, such as conditions or reasons. The chair will then confirm with the planning officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting for any reason during the consideration of an application, you will be unable to vote on that application. I will now hand the chairing of the meeting to the chair, Councillor Brooke.
Thank you very much. Clerk, do we have any apologies to the committee this evening?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Regarding minutes, to confirm as correct record the minutes of the meeting of this committee held on the 3rd of February 2025. Do I have a proposer? Oh gosh, everybody's hands up. Adam, Councillor Billings.
Actually,
sorry.
I've got a slight amendment first.
Yeah.
On page 5, the declaration of interest on 70. Thank you. Page 5, the declaration of interest under minute item 76, it lists it in relation to me for the Churston, Broadsands and Gampton Neighbourhood Forum. It should be correctly in relation to the Brixham Peninsula because it's the previous plan that was undertaken that I was notifying an interest in. If that's possible, please, Chair.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Billings. Subject to that amend, do I have a proposer? Councillor Billings, seconder. Councillor Fox. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, members. So do any members of the planning committee have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest on any of the items on today's agenda? Please raise your hand. That's none. Do any officers have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any of the items on today's agenda? That's a no. Turning to urgent items, are there any urgent items?
No, Chair.
Thank you. So moving on to the meat of the meeting, we've got item 6. This is to consider an application for Brampton Court Hotel in St Luke's Road South, Torquay, P/2023/0738. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask Miss June Pagdin to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application is for conversion of Brampton Court Hotel to use class C3 dwellings and subdivision of the built form into 14 flats, specifically 10 times 1 bedrooms and 4 times 2 bedrooms. Looking at it from the aerial view, the building is located on St Luke's promontory in Torquay, among several Victorian villas, fairly large, set in fairly spacious grounds. And you can see here it's close to I have a laser, to Torbay beach here, and Princess Walk, and this is up high on the promontory. In the Torbay local plan, the site is located in Belgravia Conservation Area, and while it's subject to no other designations in the Torbay local plan, it is designated in the Torquay neighbourhood plan as a housing site under policy TNPH 34. The area that's coloured blue is the town centre, where there's a full range of shopping facilities, and the area shaded green down here is the CTIA, or the Core Tourism Investment Area, but the actual application site is not within either of those two designations. This is the building, as seen from Carey Road. It was originally a 3-storey detached villa, this part, built in the 1800s. It's been extended to the north with two 2-storey wings. This is one, and then you can just see the other one peeping out from behind. And those are around a courtyard. And there is a single-storey extension to the south end with a conservatory, which you can see just about see the roof of in this photograph here. As you can see, the area is quite mature. There are stone walls, and the conservation area is characterised by large street trees and boundary plantings, as well as the stone walls. To the back of the site is St Luke's Park, which is like an access road, and beyond that, to the right of this photograph, are further 3-storey converted villas. They're mainly converted into flats. There's a range of other uses in the area as well. This tree is actually in the street, and it's covered by a conservation area status and an area TPO, and is to be retained. At the back of the site, it's enclosed by a wall with a fence on top. These windows are actually boarded up for security purposes at present, but they would be reopened for the residential use. There is a kitchen vent at the back here, which is a bit unsightly. That would be removed as part of the proposal. And the adjoining building here is not actually in the application site. That is the neighbouring building at Maycliff, which was a hotel, and its most recent use was as student residence. So this is the current layout. The vehicle and pedestrian access, main one, is here from the corner of St Luke's South and Carey Road. There's also a pedestrian gate in the southeast corner, which leads to what is the back of the site at the moment, and a further access here off St Luke's Park. There's and this shows the courtyard area with a lean-to within that area, which is due to be demolished. And this is currently a grassed area, and the mature planting that you saw in the photograph is along this boundary. Here's the front elevation of the building. As I explained, this is the 3-storey element, and these are 2-storey extensions which have accrued over the years, and this conservatory to the south side, which is shown in this elevation. It's the elevations of the back of the site up here, and here, this side, which you can't see from the street. This is the block that adjoins Mayfield, and this is the front block where there's an access through here with a gate. These are the elevations of the inside of the courtyard. Okay. The proposal is to change the use. The authorised use is as a hotel, but there has been a temporary student resident use in the interim, which has lapsed. The proposed use is, as I've said, for Class C3 residential in conversion into flats. There'll be, in the layout here, the main point of pedestrian access to the site is here through the main entrance. There's also a route in here to some of the units. This access is retained to one unit, and this access will be retained for some of the units in this block here. So this will be quite individual entrances. 7 parking spaces are proposed, together with turning for deliveries and emergency vehicles. So the proposed parking layout has changed a couple of times through the course of this application, and we've arrived at this as the best solution in consultation with the Highways Department. The site can really only accommodate 7 parking spaces, and for 14 flats that does leave an overspill of 7 spaces according to our parking standards, but I'll come on to that later. If there are questions, there is a parking survey that's been submitted which shows there's adequate on-site parking available for the overspill. Okay, the other items shown here on the site layout are the bin stores. This has been chosen as the best location for them. And also a bike store, which would be here, although the exact design hasn't been decided yet. That would be recommended but to be submitted by further to a condition. Sorry about that. Basically, there's the amenity area would be retained. Obviously, some of the planting would be cut back to make more space, and individual amenity spaces for Unit 1 here and Unit 3 here would be provided to enable privacy to these windows. But this would be the communal area for the other 12 flats. Okay, here are the proposed elevations. I won't spend too much time on them, but basically the principal enhancements that are proposed are removal of the slightly dilapidated canopy, re-roofing where necessary with slate tiles, and also changing the felt roofing over the conservatory into slate tiles over the new single-storey extension. In this new extension, the window frames would be timber, but in the remainder of the building, due to the large number of them and the size of some of them, these are remaining as UPVC at present, but the window openings will be retained as the sizes that they are, except on the back elevation, which I'll come to. Here, there's a couple of extra doors going in. There and there. And that's a window that would change to a door, and the other window openings are retained as they are. In the courtyard area, that's the same principles are being applied. This shows what you can't see. What you can't see probably from the annotations are very small, and the detail on this drawing is a bit hard to see from a distance. Is that this is dotted, which means it's being removed. This is a lean-to that's being removed to make the courtyard more spacious and to allow light into the ground floor unit that's here, which you'll see on the next slide. In summary, though, the Conservation and Design Officer was happy that the external changes are minor and represent enhancements over the existing building, and he had no objections. Okay, so moving on to the layout, this is the proposed ground floor plan, and you can, yes, so there are 6 units at this level. 2 are accessed from the courtyard, the purple one and the pink one. 2 are from the main entrance door, lilac or grey, and a peachy colour, and this one is having its individual route from that pedestrian gate, that's unit 4 in green, and this purple one is unit 1, which will be accessed through via its amenity space and through here. You might have noticed looking at the plans online that this kitchen is internal. The applicant has made amendments to the plans to install a light tunnel to the top of this closed-off French door and above Unit 1, which you can see on the elevation actually. Ding, ding. Here it's indicated on this elevation. It's very minimal impact on the external appearance of the building, but would have quite a significant impact on that kitchen unit, where actually daylight's not required, but the applicant was prepared to go above and beyond and provide the light tunnel. On the first floor, there's another 6 units. These 3 are accessed from the rear, and they're kind of mews style. These 2 are accessed through the main entrance door and up the staircase, and this unit is accessed via this staircase on the inner courtyard. So again, they've all got separate entrances and front doors, which make them self-contained. On the top floor, there are 2 one-bedroomed units, again accessed via the main entrance and the staircase. Here are the sections through showing the headroom. They basically do meet minimum headroom requirements. Unit 5 you'll see here, which is in the 2-storey extension wing at the back of the site. These ones have the lowest headroom in the development, but they are still 2.2 or 2.3 metres high, which is adequate. And the others are higher, some here going up to 3 metres, so that gives a nice feel and spacious feel to the rooms. And in Unit 1, the rebuilt single-storey extension, the apex of this roof is 3.3 metres. That's a different angle, but shows the same thing. This is a table. Don't expect you all to read it and take it in now, but the net total floor space for all the units is above what the nationally described space standards are. There is a variation in the sizes of the units, but that is because the building is, the main walls and rooms of the original key building are being retained wherever possible. Obviously, partitions are being added where they're necessary to meet required amenity and safety standards, but the variation in size needs to be balanced with the heritage considerations of the benefits of the building being brought back into use and being made fit for the future. This is a run-through of which neighbourhood plan policies the application has been assessed against, and this is the list of key issues and material considerations. As set out in the officer report, the proposed use is for residential. This is considered to be acceptable in principle with regards to the policies on tourism and housing in the Torbay local plan. That's T01, T02 and H1. And also the policies of the Torquay Neighbourhood Plan, TT1, TT2 and TH1. And also in line with paragraph 11 of the NPPF. This, of course, is subject to consistency with the other policies of the development plan and material considerations listed on this page. The proposal has been found to be acceptable subject to the imposition of conditions which are necessary to achieve a development appropriate to the conservation area setting, to achieve good levels of amenity for future and neighbouring occupiers, and to satisfy the ecology, biodiversity and flood risk and security concerns. So I'll lead on to the recommendation, which is approval, which subject to the planning conditions outlined in the report, the final drafting of planning conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, and also to point 2, the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee should be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Padgett. I'll call Ms Julie Brandon to address the meeting now against the application. Welcome, Ms Brandon.
I was really disappointed to learn that the chair
Sorry, you can't...
is not being allowed to speak tonight.
Sorry,
so I'm very disappointed to learn
Brandon,
this evening that she wasn't allowed to speak.
Ms Brandon, you only can speak in your 5 minutes.
I'm going to go for it. If I finish before the 5, perhaps she can have the remainder of my time.
So you have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you've got 1 minute left.
Thank you. We all know this scheme is destined to be the first of the Council's Hotels to Home scheme. So why the secrecy? The Hotel to Home scheme will provide the opportunity to repurpose no longer viable hospitality accommodation into much needed affordable housing, developing brownfield sites to help meet our housing needs and requirements, which will in turn reduce the need to develop our valued green spaces. So why the secrecy? As a near neighbour to the Brampton Court Hotel, I'm also supportive that this building be adapted as part of this scheme. So why the secrecy? However, I find myself unable to support the application in its current state for the following reasons. The application officer report in several places state market housing, which is misleading and not correct. We know it's destined to be part of your Hotels to Home scheme. That's been confirmed by Councillor Tyman to me, that it will be the first of the Hotel to Home scheme, with none of the proposed 14 apartments being made available as market housing. But instead will come under this scheme to provide social rented housing. It's surely neither right nor appropriate to mislead the public in this way in this formal planning process. Another inaccuracy in the officer's report states it's not operated as a hotel in the last 5 years. As a near neighbour, I can assure members that it had guests staying there as recently as last summer, albeit low in number and infrequent. I only mention this to highlight the shortcomings of the report. Only 7 parking spaces for 14 apartments puts this application into non-compliance with local and neighbourhood plan policies, which require 1 per apartment. A parking survey that was undertaken failed to acknowledge that the adjacent 30-plus bed hotel, the Maycliff, was and still is empty, undergoing major refurbishment, and as and when fully operational, will also create pressures on the limited parking in the area. The officer writing this report seems to think that the Maycliff is currently operating as a HIMO. I've had it confirmed today that this is also inaccurate. The Maycliff Hotel has never had permission to operate as an HMO, and as I've said, is currently empty. Its relevance to this application is to simply highlight yet another inaccurate piece of information in the officer report for the application being considered by the committee today, and to highlight the inadequacy of the parking survey that was undertaken. The reality regarding parking in this area is that we regularly see hazardous and illegal parking practices with little or no enforcement. There will certainly not be any reliable on-road parking available for residents who cannot park on the site once the 7 spaces have been taken. This lack of on-site parking provision will undoubtedly lead to a localised parking problem, to quote the Council's own policy guidance. St Luke's sits high on a hill above the seafront and served only by an infrequent community bus service. So until Torbay has a much better public transport infrastructure, there will continue to be heavy reliance on the car. Similar concerns were raised when a previous application came forward for conversion to supported living accommodation, but assurances were given at that time that the residents would not be car users, it would only be the staff. So those concerns were allayed. Finally, local plan policy TO2 states that conversion of hotels to housing must remove any late 20th century additions. And there was a statement in the heritage assessment which indicates there had been several additions to the original building, and it was mentioned today at the meeting. Yet the application only appears to deal with the removal of one. Given that this policy has previously been strictly applied to other applications for change of use from hospitality to residential in the St Luke's area, surely the council must be consistent in its approach in respect of this scheme and this policy requirement. The council have failed to engage with the community about these plans, and a recent press article would indicate that this is a done deal with permission already determined for the hotel to home schemes. Why the secrecy from the council? How can the council not engage with local residents and at the same time allow the planning process to be undermined in this way? My request to the committee today is to ask that the misleading, inaccurate and policy non-compliant application be withdrawn so that proper community engagement can take place and that the areas of policy non-compliance can be addressed, maybe by way of a smaller scheme coming forward with adequate parking and a greater provision of outside space for the future occupants. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Brandon. I call Dr Halder on behalf of the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know, as usual, when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This statement has been reviewed and approved by the steering group of the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. In our consultee response, we strongly support the conversion of this site in principle, but we urge that the issue of parking provision is carefully reconsidered to avoid creating additional strain on the local infrastructure and neighbouring residents. It is clear from the objections that the local residents share our concerns about the lack of on-site parking. The situation would be significantly exacerbated by the proposed similar rebuild of the neighbouring Mayfield Hotel. We ask that you carefully assess the Highways report on parking, as the Forum believes this could be an over-optimistic assessment. Also in our consultee response, as noted in the officers' report, we stated that the issue of whether this is to be market housing or socially affordable housing must be clarified. The officers' report on page 28 of the paper states that the application is being assessed as a market housing proposal. However, the Forum understands that this property is the first under the Hotels for Homes scheme and will be purchased by Torbay Council for affordable social housing. The Forum fully supports the overall scheme, but we question whether it is appropriate for this new approach for this property to be approved without formal consultation with local residents. Perhaps the application should be withdrawn and resubmitted in order that proper community engagement can be undertaken. The Forum welcomes the proposal to include conditions to address cycle storage and waste management. In conclusion, although we support the principle of hotels for homes, owing to the change from market to social housing, we cannot support approval without allowing for further engagement with the local community. Perhaps a way forward could be to go ahead and approve this for market housing, but have an amendment come through in future to address the issue of conversion to social housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr Halder. I'll now call Mr Alistair Powell to address the meeting in support of the application. Thank you, Mr Powell. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alistair Powell. I'm the acting architect for Torquay Architects, commissioned by the applicant for the development of the Brampton Court Hotel. As we all know, the proposal includes the conversion of the former hotel into 14 Class C3 self-contained dwellings with associated parking on a brownfield site in the Belgravia Conservation Area. The existing building sits on a very prominent corner plot with two identified principal elevations, fronting both the Kerry Road and the St Luke's Road. These two elevations are largely unspoilt and retain significant period detailing. The property also benefits from historic mature planting, predominantly to the southern side. The development therefore focuses on a sensitive and light touch approach, restoring areas of the building, removing the unsightly features, signage and clutter from the building and the site. The development will enhance the visual presence in the prominent location to ensure that it continues to positively contribute to the Belgravia conservation area. The single-storey, poorly constructed overglazed side extension, which was identified earlier, was identified as an area requiring improvement, which is cited on the St Luke's principal elevation. So the felt roof will be replaced. It is proposed that, that this is removed, reconstructed to a much higher standard with timber windows, door sets and a traditional slate roof. The development will also see the building restored back to its traditional colours. It is demonstrated that the use as a hotel is not viable and there is no reasonable prospect of the site being developed for tourism. The building also sits in an area identified for housing in the Torbay Torquay neighbourhood plan. The application therefore presents an opportunity to create 14 high-quality new homes within an existing settlement area and not utilising any additional land or building mass. The development will include the retention of all historic mature planting to the St Luke's facing elevation and also presents an opportunity to strengthen and enhance the soft landscaping, to soften the building's presence and create a high-quality, visually attractive frontage. Further landscaping details will be provided as part of the conditions. The development will see the reuse of this historic building fabric, which generally sees a saving of between 50 and 75% of embodied carbon compared to constructing new. The site is situated in a sustainable town centre location, with good connections by walking, cycling and public transport. The development includes the provision for secure cycle storage and secure cycle storage for 14 bicycles and 7 parking spaces on the site. Given the existing layout, the built form on the site and the historic context, there is not potential to provide further on-site parking spaces. The parking has been supported by the Lambeth Parking Survey and by the Highways Development Management, concluding that there is sufficient parking to accommodate any overspill from the development in the neighbouring area. The applicants are a local developer and have appointed Armada Property, who have a proven track record of delivering high-quality projects throughout Torbay and the surrounding areas. The project has been designed by local architects, will be constructed by local contractors, built for the local community, and will support local businesses and local workers. Since the purchase of the site, the applicant has gifted furniture to local charities, supported the local community, and will continue to be a catalyst for positivity throughout the project. The application seeks permission for the conversion from a hotel to market housing. The site was identified by the applicant, and Torbay Council have since shown a strong interest in the development, and it is likely that should the scheme be approved, it could become the first ever delivered under the Hotels to Home scheme, the very first of its kind right here in Torbay. The scheme could become a catalyst to help people find the security.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. The scheme could become a catalyst to help people find the security of high-quality home, attracting key workers to help support public services and the community, all while positively and proactively enhancing the built environment. In summary, this is a sensitive development on a brownfield site. It presents an exciting opportunity to positively utilise a 3-storey Victorian villa by creating much-needed residential accommodation, and I'm hopeful you'll recommend it for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. So, committee members, I'll now invite you for questions to the planning officer. And as usual, please may I remind members, questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any members wishing to ask a question not covered by the officer's report? Lots of hands. Councillor Mandy Darling, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask the planning officer, please, with regard to the parking? The Lambeth Parking Survey was undertaken in the middle of the night. Is that a usual occurrence? Do they do parking surveys at any other time of the day, or is that the usual time to do it?
Yeah, the Lambeth parking survey methodology is a standard one for the industry nationwide, although it started off in Lambeth, which is named after. It's principally used for residential parking concerns, and it looks at what the overnight parking situation is, because during the daytime people come and go, visitors come and go, deliveries come and go, work people come and go, but overnight it's principally the residents who park in their local area, and that's why the survey is undertaken in the night, between midnight and 5 in the morning, when most people are asleep and their cars are in the street, if they're going to be in the street and not on site. So that's why. Is that an adequate answer, or is there follow-up?
Councillor Verdi.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the parking again. Is there any reason why a parking survey wasn't done outside of those hours? Is there any reckoning on that?
It's just that is when those surveys are done, for when you're assessing conversions to residential use. Obviously it started in Lambeth, where much of the townscape is townhouses with no on-site parking at all, and the roads are heavily used for residents parking, and so this methodology was adopted to determine whether there was on-street parking available. Now, it's done between midnight and 5 or 5:30 in the morning for that reason. The survey undertaken here was done in line with that methodology and looked at all the available legal on-site parking spaces within 200 metres of the application site, and looked at how many of those were occupied on 2 nights during the week, not in school holidays, and that's deliberately to eliminate visitor or tourism parking, and to determine how many of the on-street spaces are taken up by people who would normally residents who would normally expect to park their cars in those streets. And the Highways Authority was consulted, and our strategic transport team were consulted on that survey and on the application, and they had no objections to the proposal on that basis. That the findings of the report, I can spell them out, were that there was over 190 spaces in the vicinity, and that 36% of those, i.e. 71 spaces, were not occupied on the nights of the survey.
Thank you for that. Just another one. Now, you've touched on the parking. You've tried quite hard to find the best parking on site. Is there no way you can create any other spaces there? Maybe reducing the bin storage, etc.?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to move up to the site layout. Here we are. Where's my laser? The 7 spaces here are standard sizes. The need for vehicles to do deliveries, when there's, as the photograph showed, yellow lines around the actual site itself, means that the best way to come in is forwards and to reverse there, to turn round, to go back out. Because it's on a corner site, it's quite important that vehicles can turn on the site. When the bin store was located here originally, that would have been rather in the way of the reversing movement. It would also mean that the bin store was the first thing you see when you look at the site from Carey Road. So it's considered that this, although it's slightly further from the pickup point down here was a better location for the operation of this forecourt area. Does that answer your question?
It does in a way. You know, on the schematic there just seems to be, you know, possibly more space for spaces for cars. I don't know, how many bins would 14 apartments require?
Can I just interject here? We've got to look at the application as it is, though, Councillor Verdi. You know, it's come in full with 7.
Yeah.
You know, we can't redesign it, so we've got to just decide on the application as it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we looked at the layout and it has changed a couple of times. We thought about putting the parking spaces down here and having access through here to get to that entrance, but it wouldn't have allowed adequate turning. And this is also a reversing space. When you have a parking space that's 4.8 metres long, you also need 6 metres behind it so that you can reverse back out and get back out of the site in forward gear as well. So that was important consideration. In terms of the bins, with 14 flats, you need 14 wheelie bins. And this has been measured to take that number of bins and recycling boxes. We have a guideline that the architect has been looking at to specify how big they should be.
So there's separate bins for each flat, not a large communal bins?
That's the proposal, yes.
Okay. Just another thing. Now, Julie Brandon mentioned there was a lot of secrecy and no community engagement had taken place. What is the secrecy, if any, and what's the community engaged?
Is this about the affordable housing element?
That's correct, yes.
Right. Okay. The proposals is submitted for 14 market housing units. Pardon me. And that means that it's below the threshold for affordable housing being provided on site through the normal planning application and Section 106 process. As it's an application for market housing, that is how the council has had to deal, well, the planning department has had to deal with it. I believe the architect has just explained that the potential for it to be part of the Hotels to Home scheme came on stream after their application had been first mooted. However, there's nothing to prevent the council. Well, so there's 2 points here. The first is that the housing proposal and the quality of the accommodation has been assessed against the requirements for market housing, which are the same as for affordable housing and found to be adequate, subject to the conditions in the report. And secondly, forgot what the second one was. It'll come to me in a minute. There's no requirement through the planning application process to secure affordable housing within the 14 units. So I had to deal with it as a market proposal and as it was submitted. The council's free to pursue that's what it was. The council is free to pursue other ways of securing affordable housing other than through large planning applications that exceed 15 units. So I'm not part of the housing department. I can't tell you what the exact details of any negotiations are, so I'm just presenting this planning application as it was submitted to the planning department.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions, if I may. First one, the officer referred to the application sitting within a range of other uses. Is there any way you could be slightly more specific about what those other uses are? My second question again comes back to parking, and my question is, when this property was in use as a hotel, when it had 20 bedrooms, was there a parking issue at that time? And my third question is, given the extreme situation we have in relation to the lack of affordable housing in Torbay, which is of crisis proportion, is the officer view that the application has not been manipulated? Is that the correct view, that in fact the application has not been manipulated to get down below the 15 dwelling threshold that we have? I'd just like the officers to sort of just let me know on that. Thank you.
Right, I'll take them in the order they were asked. The first question was about other uses in the area. Many of these Victorian villas, let's go up to the Google plan. Many of these villas in this area are converted into flats, so they're residential too. The adjoining site at Maycliff, as it's not an HMO, was previously a hotel, had temporary permission for student residences, and now is closed while work is being done to it. So we do not have a current application for that site, so its future use is not known at this point. These are more converted houses, and some of the houses seem to be letting out some of the apartments as bookable units, possibly Airbnb, possibly through other letting agencies. There's quite a range of them. That is what I meant by other uses in the area. Secondly, on the matter of parking for the hotel when it was used as such, there were 20 bedrooms and there were 7 parking spaces on site. Presume there must have been some overspill onto the surrounding roads at that time. And that would have been, well, no, one space per bedroom would have needed 20 spaces. So the overspill would have been higher as a hotel. Not aware of any particular issues that were raised at the time, although there may have been occasionally, but I'm not aware of any. The parking survey would suggest that there are adequate spaces in the area for overnight parking for several more cars than 20. So on to the third question. The current proposals for 10 one-bedroom flats and 4 two-bedroom flats. That's quite a normal mix for a subdivision of a property. The previous application for this site was for 14 supported units, which had 14 self-contained but single units and some communal spaces. This application is comparable to that in that there are 14 units, but these spaces spread out between the flats, which enables some 2-bedroom ones to be introduced. The planning department is certainly not manipulating anything. We're just dealing with the application as it was submitted to us. Because there are 14 units, it doesn't require affordable housing through the planning application and Section 106 process. But as I've said before, the council can pursue affordable housing through other processes.
Apologies if I inferred that you were doing the manipulating. That wasn't my intention. It was whether the development was being manipulated that you had to deal with. Sorry about that.
I'd just bring in Jim Blackwell on this, please.
Thank you. Just making the point that obviously consulted widely as part of this application, received representations, consulted with our usual consultees. But I know you've mentioned hotels to homes a few times now, and we do have David Pick over here from our planning policy team who may be able to provide a little bit more information for you, just to make sure we cover the questions and some of the words spoken.
you, Jim. So I was actually sort of tried to get your attention because of the parking issue, which, as Mrs. Pagden has said, is one space per bedroom for hotels plus provision for dropping off and setting down and coach provision. My understanding of the application, just to go on to the affordable housing issue, is that the application before you is for housing for Class C3 use, and it's under the threshold for affordable housing. When we looked at the application from a policy point of view, it didn't appear to me, by the size of the units that were proposed, some of them are fairly modest, so it didn't appear to me that there was an attempt to gerrymander the threshold to get under development. I suppose it's for the committee to decide whether or not that they're determining it just as a straightforward C3 plan application for C3 dwellings, or whether or not how much, if any, weight the provision of affordable housing should be given, because my understanding of it is it is part of the council's hotels to homes programmes. The only thing I would say that if members do want to give that weight, then the MPPF has been changed to significantly increase the weight provided both for brownfield conversions and also for the provision of affordable housing. There's a pressing need for general housing in Torbay. The government's target is 940 homes a year, and if that isn't met on brownfield sites, that will put additional pressure on greenfield sites. There is also pressure for affordable housing, but that, we're under, the application is subject to a presumption in favour of sustainable development, irrespective of whether or not it's affordable housing or not.
Thank you. Councillor Scrang.
I'd just like to pick up on a couple of other points that Mrs. Brandon made. One of those was guests still staying in the property as hotel guests last summer. And the second was the reference to the Mayfield building as an HMO, but I think you've already clarified that one.
Is this a question about whether the use in the summer was as a hotel?
Yeah.
When I went on site in January and looked at the standard of the accommodation, I don't think it qualifies as a hotel. So it may have been as student accommodation again, or as hostel type, but it wasn't authorised, and if it was that, it wasn't an authorised use because the student residence permission had lapsed. I don't think it's been running, well, it hasn't been running as officially as a hotel of any quality for many years, is how I would answer that, really.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Billings.
Thanks, Chair. Couple of questions, please, Mr. Pagden. First one, page 19 of the agenda papers, it's the first page of your report. You list the application number as P2023-0738. Could I just confirm it's P2024? It is. Okay. Then just turning on a little bit further. Page 28 of the report, under the heading of affordable housing, so you make the point that the proposal is for 14 market housing units, and again, if we turn back to the first page of the report, we see that the applicant is Brampton Limited. So I'm correct to understand that there's been an application submitted by a third party that's not the council, and that they have put an application in for 14 open market houses, and that's what your report has assessed. Is that a correct interpretation of it?
That's correct. That's what the applicant has applied for, yes. It's been explained to me he wants it to be considered as market housing, regardless of what other discussions are going on.
Okay. From a policy perspective, if this had been an application, a different application for social housing or affordable housing, what difference would we apply to it in planning terms, please?
In terms of the details of the design and the layout and the provisions, it would have been dealt with exactly the same way. It would have had perhaps a policy weight behind it, that it was affordable following through from the NPPF and the current housing situation in Torquay. But it would have, the description of development is the description of development that we have on this. That's all I have to say.
But there's no difference in planning terms if you've got an application for 14 open market ones and an application for 14 affordable or social ones. There'd be no difference in planning terms making the judgment about one would be acceptable when another one wouldn't be, in planning terms. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, there are sites where both are proposed and they're expected to meet the same standards.
Thank you. On turning to page 39 of the agenda papers, condition 2 refers to window frames in the single-storey extension being timber. My understanding is the existing footprint is broadly occupied by a UPVC conservatory. What is the need in planning terms that gives the basis to apply that condition that the frames should be timber? I appreciate that it would be desirable, but against a context where there's already a UPVC conservatory and that the single-storey extension, howsoever constructed, would appear to be better than the UPVC conservatory. What's the planning need, please, that relates to the timber window frames?
Well, the buildings in the Belgravia conservation area where we generally expect there to be timber window frames. This has been a push, and we've aimed for consistency on this in conservation areas, especially where there are applications to replace window frames with UPVC frames. We've been very consistent in pushing for timber ones for various reasons. Like there's the appearance, which can make a big difference because the profiles are a lot slimmer than UPVC ones, and they tend to last longer, and replacing them means that there's less plastic waste, which is more environmentally sound. So we push for timber frames. The applicant was probably not in a position to retain the conservatory and use it for residential use because it wouldn't pass various building regulations, probably. But they have taken the opportunity to provide an enhancement in the appearance of that part of the building.
Sorry, Chair, I'm getting to the end of the questions I've got. If we could turn to condition 4, which is details of the light tunnel. If I understand the drafting as currently written, prior to the above ground construction, we want some details, and then it must be installed in accordance with the details. I just wonder whether we're being a little bit onerous in terms of saying we want the details at a certain stage. Don't we just want the details to be before it's occupied or before it's fully built? I was relatively relaxed about when those details came forward.
Well, it would be built as part of the conservatory, which is the only above-ground development taking place here, so I thought that was an appropriate wording. So we have the details before they start to build where it's going to go. It means that they can do other refurbishment works of the existing built form. But when it comes to the conservatory reconstruction or as a single-storey extension, they'll need to have submitted details of a light tunnel so that we know how it fits in and so that they've got that on their drawings when they start building it.
Thank you, that's helpful. I can understand the reasoning there. Thank you, Chair. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Penny.
Thank you, Chair. We heard from one of the speakers concerns about engagement and transparency around this application. So I would just seek from the officer a reassurance that with this application, all the required advertising of this application was fulfilled.
Yeah, the application was advertised through a site notice in November and through letters to neighbours in the vicinity. It was at the same time with the normal 21-day response period.
Councillor Tolshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I think we probably accept that our highways people are quite happy with the results of the Lambeth parking survey. But I notice actually that they refer to EV charging and disability parking. Will there be any designated disability parking for disabled people within those 7 spaces? And what's the provision for EV charging, please?
Thank you. The parking layout's actually quite tight, but it's possible that this could be a disabled parking space because there's room to open the door, although it's close to the steps. Perhaps if you reversed in to open the door to the side. That hasn't been conditioned to be at present. But condition 6 requires details of an electric vehicle charging point to be provided.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Councillor? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Verdi.
Just a quick one again on parking. Is the parking allocated or will it be first come, first serve, whoever gets there first?
It hasn't been shown as allocated. I think it will be up to the management of the units to determine how those spaces are allocated and managed. But the condition on provision, I believe the wording makes it clear that it should be for the use of residents of the unit, of the development itself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, colleagues? I've got a couple of questions, if I may. The first one is linked to parking, and it's in 2 parts. On page 33, is it page 30? Bear with me. No, where is the Torquay neighbourhoods? No, sorry, page 24, the Torquay Neighbourhood Plan Forum makes the following comments with regard to the survey. Consider the parking survey provides an unrealistic assessment available of on-street parking. So my first question is, did you have any elaboration on that? What was meant by, I think I know now, but just to see on the unrealistic assessment part.
No further comments were submitted about how realistic the survey was, but
there might be some anecdotal evidence about parking. It's a big issue, isn't it, parking? But we the applicant has provided a report that's at a national standard. We've consulted with Highways. They've given us a comment back. We've written a report. We take a balanced judgment. I have to make that really clear because there's regular challenges about those people making those professional reports and professional comments. They have no objection. That's quite clear. Okay, thanks.
Miss Brandon, you can't. Miss Brandon, you can't interrupt the meeting. Miss Brandon, if you don't stop talking, you'll be asked to leave, I'm afraid. You know you're not allowed to speak when we're doing the questions. I'm afraid, Miss Brandon, if you do that again, I will have to ask you to leave. There's a set way of doing these things where members are asked the questions so they can then come and debate. You've had your 5 minutes to say what you thought. We need to follow that procedure. Thank you. Just the second question is linked to the parking, because the survey, I noted that the survey gave 71 spaces available when it was done. Just out of interest, what point do you get this sort of threshold where, you know, I think it was 60% was taken. Is it like get to about 90, 95 and then you say that could be an issue? Is there a planning guidance on that side of things? So when you get 60-odd%, is that really significantly, there's a lot of availability, but there's a sort of measurement, you get to 90, 95, and then there's an issue. Thank you.
Well, I'd look to my highway and strategic transport colleagues for a detailed response on that, but I think that the survey finding that 36% of over 190 were vacant is quite an indication that there's ample in the area.
Thank you. And my final question is, again, in looking at the Torquay Neighbourhood Plan Forum comment, it talks about the conservation area and like restoration, removal, clutter, provision of amenity space, etc. Other than what you said, I read that I think you said that there've been the enhancements. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on, so I haven't missed something, in your opinion, the improvements through this scheme? Thank you.
The first and most noticeable would probably be the removal of the canopy, which is here, and kind of obscures a rather neat Gothic arch over the front door, which would then become shown visible to the street. You see that through the elevations. There, that canopy would go and you'd see the arch on the front door. Also being removed is photos. Sorry about flicking. There. The vent at the back will be going because that's for the kitchen, for the communal catering at the moment. So that will go. There's I haven't got a photograph of it, but there we go. This UPVC lean-to would go, although that's not visible from the street. The planting will be tidied up, although I haven't got a submitted landscaping scheme at this stage. That is the subject of a condition. Condition number 7, requiring a landscaping scheme. The bins that are here at the moment are not in a bin store and are in a dilapidated state, so that would be improved by a tidy bin store there. And to go back to the photo of the building, there's areas the plaster is in very poor condition, and the proposal appears to include repainting and probably touching up the plaster to improve that as well. Also inherent in the scheme to refurbish it is to repair the roof, which has been leaking in places and made quite some damp patches into the internal spaces, so that would be an enhancement too. And stone walls would be retained. So those, in summary, are the enhancements.
Thank you very much.
If there aren't any further questions, members, I'm just going to open up the application now for debate. Councillor Pentney.
Thank you, Chair. If it's okay, members, I've been listening to the questions. There's a few areas, obviously, that we've scrutinised. There's the issues around engagement, transparency, and some accuracy issues, and I think we can move quickly on from them. I think, obviously, the legal level of to the degree to which this is advertised, I'm sure has been met. I think as a kind of broad passing comment, we can always do better as an authority to improve our engagement and transparency on things. But, obviously the fact that that perhaps hasn't been achieved in this case wouldn't be a reason not to proceed with this application. We've talked about parking a lot. Mr. Blackwell, you mentioned earlier the kind of anecdotal evidence around that. I, alongside Councillor Mandy Darling, our ward councillors, I know this area very well, and certainly during the day, there is a big parking problem there, and I doubt there's any residents of St Luke's Road who will tell you otherwise. But I do understand the rationale behind the Lambeth survey, and indeed where I have been up there in the evening for community meetings, parking is more available in the evening. So it's fair to assume that a lot of the parking issues you see there during the day are those of shoppers and people perhaps working in the town centre. So I think it would be hard to conclude that the addition of these properties would exacerbate that problem. I think that problem is still there, still pronounced, still needs solving, but in a forum outside of this planning committee. And obviously, again, affordable housing, I think there is a sense of kind of missed opportunity with this a bit. I mean, this is the first to be delivered under the Hotels to Home scheme. And, the fact it comes in just under that triggering threshold, it's frustrating to say the least. And, you'd really like to see, especially because it was brought about by that Hotels to Home scheme, I'm just a bit disappointed that we weren't really pushing for that, because I can see in those 7 car parking spaces, I mean, I'm obviously not an architect, but I can see easily one more property that would trigger that threshold. However, and I think this is the point Councillor Billings was making, we have to deal with what's in front of us, and whatever I may think has or has not happened in terms of that threshold, unfortunately, I think we can't consider is outside the parameters of our decision making this evening. So I think we have been quite thorough, and we've attacked certain areas of this application, parking, affordable housing, the transparency issues. But so far, I can't see any reason why we wouldn't, but notwithstanding my sense of frustration about a real missed opportunity under what is otherwise a great idea, the Hotels to Home scheme.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. I share Councillor Pentney's frustrations on this, especially regarding affordable housing. But I would say, in view of the urgency we have, we've got to get real about the urgency on housing in this bay, that we should, in fact, go for this and not delay. As I know Rodney Horton had good arguments for delay, but I would strongly argue we override that and we make a decision this evening. It's designated in the neighbourhood plan positively. There is an urgent need. I would just also add 2 other points. One, in relation to condition 2 on timber frames, I would say in relation to its conservation area location, that would keep condition 2 in. And thirdly, I'd just like to support Councillor Tolchard's request for a disabled parking provision there as well. I think that was a point well made, and I would agree. And when the time comes, I'll be willing to propose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Strang.
Looking at the overall scheme, I think all it does is enhances the building. We've got the ethos of keeping the timber frame windows where they can be seen, and the PVC windows where they can't. I've got no issue with that. And I think overall it's a commendable scheme for us to put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Strang. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. I'd probably be a little less onerous on that condition too, but I appreciate the views of other colleagues, and I appreciate the views of professional officers on that. I think if we're getting to looking at this in the perspective where we might be approving it, I think on condition 1 we should make sure we refer to that as a construction management plan. I think the text in it goes beyond just traffic. I can see the point that was made earlier by the speaker, Ms. Brandon. I do understand that. I can assume, doing the best I can, what's probably happened here, that you've got an applicant who's in a contract with the council, who's trying to negotiate a sale of a building that they own and trying to put it forward. Not every I, T's been on the contract's been dotted or crossed, and at that stage, if you were the applicant, I'm just putting myself in that shoes, I'd be putting it in for open market housing, because if the deal didn't come off with the council, that's the most usable consent to another purchaser. And this scheme has then been assessed based off what's been submitted. And subsequently, maybe the council could have done more to go alongside it, and to have made it clear that sort of, well, this was anticipated to be one of the first hotels to homes projects, as Councillor Tyman's been clear on. That might not have been the case when the application was first submitted, and just helped a little bit of the language about that, so as to avoid a situation which might appear to have happened, where there's been a little bit of perspective that anything's been hidden. I don't believe that's been the case at all, but I can see how one would form that view from certainly the way that the application's been submitted, and the reference in this officer report correctly to the market housing, which is the application we've got in front of us. Clearly, if we're going to make the best use of our brownfield sites and bring these forward, this building seems ideal for that. And what I would say is, looking at the size of the proposed units, some of them being slightly below the space standard, slightly above, defer to other colleagues if they think they've got a different way of the internal layout, but I don't see how you'd get more than 14 units in there. So I think actually recognising some of the challenges that have been brought to bear on this scheme, I can also see how it stands up against those. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I still do have a few concerns about the parking, but I take on board that the survey has been done and says that it is not going to be an issue. This hotel obviously has been empty for some time, and it is on a brownfield site, so it is ideal. And we do need to be using our brownfield sites, because we do have a real need for housing. And if we don't use our brownfield sites, then we're going to have to go on to our greenfield sites, which nobody wants either. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Councillor Billings.
Sorry, Chair, I meant to add it earlier as well, but I think to the extent this might come forward in the form of affordable social housing, I think we need to understand that the way I understand the Devon Home Choice list is that for a one-bedroom self-contained flat, the income threshold is £45,250 a year, and for a two-bedroom apartment, the income threshold would be 57,100 a year. So amongst the different types of social or of affordable housing, some of these units have got very good sea views. They're going to be of the more expensive types of social or affordable housing that there is, because of where it's located, because of the views that are on offer, because the way that rents relate to the market value of the premises. So I would have suggested that if there's in any of the concerns that have been issued to say, well, sort of the need to create cohesive communities, I would highlight those income thresholds. Those are actually sort of very high, and I think that would probably help some of the discussion, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Any further comments? My own comment is that I heard what was said about potentially the Maycliff, etc., and 30 spaces. That's why I was asking about the percentages up from the Lambeth survey, which we've done, and we have to work on what we got in front of here. But linking that in anyway to give some reassurance to residents, and following on from what Councillor Pentney has said, there's 71 spaces, and if another 30 come, etc., there's still plenty of spaces. So, thank you. If there's no more debate, we potentially got a couple of amendments to conditions in condition 1, and also in condition, well, we haven't got one on the disability parking, whether we add that into condition 6. I don't know. Can we get clarification on whether we have a specifically extra one for disability parking, or whether we add it into one of the conditions?
Condition 5 is parking as per plan. It might be best added to that one.
Yeah, fine. And then in condition 1, Councillor Billings mentioned about a change of wording.
Yes, Chair, I'd just delete the word traffic in the title.
Can we have a readout, because it's obvious what that was for condition 1, can we just have a quick readout of the change in the wording for condition 5, and then I'll ask for somebody to propose and somebody to second.
So condition 5 at the moment says provision of parking as per site plan. The 7 car parking spaces on site, as shown on the site layout plan and the drawing number, shall be retained and provided for the free use of occupants and visitors to the site prior to the first occupation for use hereby permitted. And we could add in within that with the provision of a disabled parking space, and we could highlight that on the plan. So that can be provided as part of the submission, and we can send you that to delegated if you decide to vote that way.
Councillor Billings.
Can I just clarify, Chair, in relation to that? Let's assume none of the units are occupied by any disabled people. That would take away one of the available parking spaces, because it would be required to left not parked in for a disabled person, potentially. I'm not sure. Imagine, for example, that you'd got 14 young families that occupied 14 units in that premises. Can I be clear from members of the committee that their anticipation that one of those 7 parking spaces should be left vacant for the potential that it might need to be used? Is that the intention, please?
Councillor Fox.
I would just say, well, following what Councillor Billings is saying, you can't assume because a family is young that there isn't a disabled member of that family. So I would still like to have that in as one of the 7 spaces for disabled use.
Councillor Pentney.
Just to pick this up a bit further, and again, might be one for you, Councillor Fox. We're talking about, because as I understand it, if you're in a supermarket car park where the the siting of a disabled bay is relevant and deliberate in terms of closer to an accessible area, for instance, would you just be looking for changes to the nature of that bay, wider, longer, or what have you, or indeed its location, or just purely marked as such, so there's always one available?
Excuse me, can we have no talking in the audience, please? Excuse me, thank you. Can we have no talking in the audience? Thank you.
Yes, I will go along with Councillor Pentley on the second of those two, to have an area marked out for that in the eventuality. And I'm sure that eventuality will be there statistically in that number of units, that there will be somebody with a disabled need for a car park.
I think your wording there, Councillor Fox, may have just solved that problem, where you say in the eventuality. Because I understand what Councillor Billings is saying is, you know, if we have the first 14 group of people and none of them need a disabled spot, then by specifically allocating it, that takes out one spot. But in the eventuality, might not. Councillor Billings.
Correct me if I'm wrong, officers. Outside the site is double yellow.
Yes.
And it's not no waiting. It's double yellow. It's not no waiting. Is that correct? So therefore, a disabled badge holder could park legitimately on the double yellows. I'm not saying that's how we should force them to, but I'm just sort of just in the balance in the round, sort of highlighting this, and just so this isn't the nearest alternative. Would be a very long distance away. It wouldn't be ideal, and I think therefore trying to pick up the if needed, because if clearly we've got residents who have family members who are disabled, clearly I very much take on what Councillor Fox is saying, but what I don't want to do is if none of the occupants of the premises have any visitors who ever use these spaces on a regular basis, I would just be cautious about taking one of those 7 out of commission, given the pressures that we've heard about earlier about parking in the vicinity. And I'd just like some wording to maybe pick up on that, Councillor.
Councillor Fox?
I just wonder whether Councillor Tolchard, you sort of started this off. We all blame you for this. I just wonder if you've got a view from what you've heard around the table. Do you feel strongly that there should be a space actually on the site, or are you going along with the idea that the yellow lines nearby would be sufficient?
Thank you, Chair. It's easy to appreciate both sides, isn't it? But I feel that the allowing parking on the double yellow lines is probably not going to help a disabled person. But I do, with the distance from the access to the property. But, yeah, I still think on balance that I would go for having a designated space put aside for a disabled person. I mean, it's quite difficult to have a dual purpose, as it were. You can imagine fisticuffs occurring. And it may be that, you know, in the first occupancy, there's residents who are all able-bodied, but, you know, then possibly not going to live there forever. And as I started it off, I think I would still like, if possible, to have a condition in that the space nearest the front door is designated as disabled parking, if other members agree. Thank you, Chair.
Jim.
Thank you. From an officer's point of view, we would recommend that we'd retain a space for disabled users. It's the nearest to the front door and it has enough width. So from an officer's point of view, we'd recommend you'd include that in the condition, and we can amend that so it's really clear. That's okay. Thank you, Dave. And we'll keep to things within the red line of the site rather than double yellow lines debate.
Councillor Verdi.
Just a quick one. There's, I believe, 2 apartments had access on the other side, on St. Luke's Park. So would there be any kind of factor in there? Is there parking on St. Luke's Park available?
I can answer that. There were no parking restrictions on St Luke's Park. There were vehicles parked there. I suspect they'd be the first to get used by residents in the area, but they are available, yes. Although the access at the back is not suitable for disability parking because it's up steps.
Just thinking, should the steps at the back be disability friendly? Is that a requirement or not?
There is no opportunity to change the steps in a conservation area with the change of level. I think it's very tight to the road as well, isn't it? So I think it's not something the application is what it is, and we're here to determine it based on that recommendation. So difficult to do that judgment now, I'm afraid.
Councillor Billings.
I think what we've probably reached, Chair, with some of the debate is probably a reasonable compromise. A sort of, I take on board the sort of the benefit of having a disabled bay right next to that front door. If I was if I was sort of thinking for my mum, who's very older now, I'd want her to have a space right next to that front door and a unit on the ground floor that was easy to access. And looking through that prism, I think that would, if this was coming forward as a sensible council or any other landlord, I think one would try and fit the units accordingly. So I think recognising some have got a more difficult access, I think probably within the round we can tolerate. It's a conservation area. It's difficult to improve them all, perhaps, Councillor Verdi. So I think that was a helpful discussion in terms of parking provision earlier. I do agree with my colleagues in hindsight, so I'm prepared to conclude on that.
Councillor Fox.
Chair, if there's no further ado in this, I will propose that we approve the application subject to changes to condition 1, condition 5, and that we keep condition 2 as it is.
Do I have a seconder?
I'd like to second that proposal of Councillor Fox, please.
Seconded by Councillor. So I'll go to the vote now. All those in favour, subject to those amendments?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, councillors. So the proposal's been approved. We're just going to take 5 minutes for swapping around of officers. Yeah, bring back the meeting to order, thank you. So we're now going to item number 5. This is to consider an application for Mayfield School, which is on Moor Lane in Torquay. Planning application number is P/2024/0814. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask Mr. Jim Blackwell to introduce the application. Jim.
Thank you, Chair. This application has been presented to members as it lies on council-owned land and attracted objections. So looking at the plan before you, the site contains a relatively modern school complex with a low-lying single and two-storey buildings with flat and pitched roofs and rendered walls. The access to the school is gained from entrances on Moor Lane and Steps Lane. Steps Lane to the west, Moor Lane to the south. The site lies to the north of Moor Lane on the outskirts of Torquay and sits within Watcombe Park Conservation Area. It's also in Flood Zone 1 and a critical drainage area. In terms of the description of development, it's a full plan application for the replacement of existing air handling unit with new units with heat recovery and the installation of 2 new air heat source pumps to serve the new air handling unit. The proposal includes a new steel frame to support the removal and replacement of existing ventilation ductwork. The development is taking place on a flat roof of the school building located centrally within the school complex. Here is the aerial photo. You can see here the arrow is actually pointing at the area that's the proposal lies. That's the current ductwork. Here's the existing simple roof plan. On the left is the existing layout of the ductwork. On the right is the proposed, just largely in this area. In terms of the existing and proposed elevations, here is the existing, here is the proposed, and the same on the other elevation, the south elevation as well. Here's the west elevation existing and proposed, east section existing and proposed. So here is the current location of the development as proposed. This is the conifers, which I'll come on to shortly. This is the sort of landscaping and the change of level between those properties. And this is the inverted roof slope. As you can see here, here are the units. Here's the roof slope. Here's the grassed area and the change of level to the conifers. Here is the photo looking south. So as I said, this application is before you because there have been a number of issues raised as far as representations, 4 letters of objection, mainly around visibility, the visual appearance, noise, impact on amenity, closeness, proximity to the dwellings, setting a precedent, the pipework and installation are considered an eyesore, discharge of fumes and disturbance from the construction and installation works. In terms of the consultation responses, there are no objections. Looking at the principal development, Mayfield School is a council-maintained special education needs school. Proposed installation is for the hydrotherapy pool. It's generally used for hydrotherapy purposes for the school's own pupils, although they do occasionally let out to members of the local community to hold swimming lessons for young children. There are 3 main reasons why these works are proposed. The existing system is in poor condition and want to avoid a serious failure, which would severely impact on the pupils' use of the facility. The proposed air handling unit allows for better control of humidity and the climatic controls in the pool hall, and therefore enhancing the pupil experience. And the proposed use is an air handling unit that incorporates heat recovery technology. That means any waste heat can be recaptured and put back into the pool hall rather than discarding it. They're combined with air source heat pumps. This should help reduce the energy consumption of the school. In addition to this, the proposed system will help reducing the carbon emissions of Torbay Council in line with the environment and net zero carbon policy. In terms of design, visual impact, including heritage assets, as I've said, it's in the Watcombe Park Conservation Area, albeit within the Carriage Area 3, which is later development. Location of development is not visible from public vantage points due to topography, and those intervening features included pitch roofs on the school and its central location Concerns over the visual appearance of the development has been raised and objections. However, the roof currently contains ductwork, and it's considered that the location of the development is discrete and an acceptable form of design for the roof of a school building with limited visibility. The only likely point of visibility is from the private dwellings at the conifers, which I showed earlier to the north of the site. These are bungalows with rear gardens facing towards the school and the location of the proposed development. These are sited at high level, however, they feature boundary screening, limited views of the proposed development. Overall, while these developments may achieve a view of the development beyond the pitch roof of the school, located close to proximity, the resultant visual appearance is not considered to be harmful or detrimental to the appearance of the existing school. Residential amenity. Objections too have been raised about the potential for noise and the impacts on residential amenity of the discharge of fumes and potentially chlorine. The development project is located approximately 26 metres from the rear elevation of the nearest dwelling, which is 12 of the conifers. Supporting information has confirmed that, as per the heat pump specification provided with the application, each heat pump has a sound pressure of 45 decibels. Therefore, the two combined should have a sound pressure level of approximately 48 decibels from a distance of 1 metre away. Given that the fence's nearest property of 12 the conifers is a distance of approximately 30 metres away from the proposed heat pumps, it's been calculated that the assumed sound pressure detectable at neighbour's fence should be approximately 18.5 decibels, roughly equivalent to having a quiet conversation. In addition to this, it should be noted that it is intended that the fans of the heat pumps, where most of the noise comes from, shall face south away from the neighbouring properties, so there's no intention for the heat pumps to be used continuously. The supporting statement also notes that there's a minimal change to how the proposed air handling unit will operate. The proposed unit works in exactly the same way as existing. The only difference is the heat recovery technology, so capturing the heat, put it back into the fresh air and supplied in the pool hall rather than exhausting it out into the atmosphere. The existing system will emit some chlorine, as do all swimming hydrotherapy pools. Although it's given its small size, this will be very low levels and will not cause harm or nuisance to neighbouring properties. The proposed system works the same way as the existing system works. The Council's Senior Environmental Health Officer has no objection. Given the clarification provided in respect to likely noise generated, the distance from the nearest residential properties to the proposed development, proposed equipment, and clarification on emissions, consider the proposal as an adequate level of amenity for the residential properties. Ecology. The application is accompanied by a bat survey report. There's no evidence of bats and no evidence of nesting birds, although it's possible that flat roof areas of the building on and surrounding the site could be used for breeding gull species. It's recommended that the impacts of the features with a potential support nesting birds should be timed to avoid any nesting period. The report also confirms that no further surveys are required. The report suggests biodiversity enhancement, which is secured by condition. The proposed development site sits within flood zone 1 and the wider Torbay critical drainage area, as designated by the Environment Agency. The proposed development not result in an increase in permeable footprint over 20 square metres and results in development on the roof, which are not considered to impact on the flood risk and drainage of the building. Low carbon development and climate change. The supporting statement confirms the proposed use of air handling unit that incorporates heat recovery technology, which is supported, helping to reduce the energy consumption to school, and it also linked with reducing the carbon emissions by Torbay Council in line with the environment and net zero carbon policy. So in conclusion, the proposal is accepted in principle, doesn't result in any harm to the character of the area, conserves the conservation area, acceptable impact on neighbour amenity, provides acceptable arrangements in terms of flood risk, ecology, and low carbon, and is acceptable from a low carbon development perspective. It therefore has acceptable in principle. Policies. So the officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to conditions outlined in the committee report, with final drafting conditions delegated to the divisional director. Resolution of any new material consideration that may come to light following a planning committee to be delegated to the divisional director, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blackwell. I'm now going to call on Dr. Rodney Halder on behalf of Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. Dr. Halder, as usual, you have 5 minutes, and the clerk will let you know when there's 1 minute to go.
Thank you, Chair. One day I might fill the 5 minutes. This statement has been reviewed and approved by the steering group of the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. As this was a relatively minor application, the Forum did not submit a consultee response to the original application. The school is a working building, and this application is for replacement of the existing air handling system together with the addition of 2 air heat pumps. This will consequently have environmental benefits as it will reduce reliance on fossil fuels. The Forum cannot see any conflict with development plan policies. It meets the aspiration of Local Plan Policy SS14 and Aspiration 5 of the plan and the associated ES policies, and it meets the intent of SC3 in improving school facilities. Although objections have been made about the visual impact, it's hard to see why the replacement equipment would cause visual impact compared with the existing equipment and ducting. With regard to noise, we note the detailed assessment and the conclusion that there would be no adverse effect on amenity, although the Torquay neighbourhood plan is silent on this aspect of planning. The reference to the Paynton Neighbourhood Plan Policy, PNP1C, covers moving towards a low carbon economy, which we would also support. So overall, the Forum is satisfied that there are no issues with overall amenity, and we support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Halder. So, committee members, now's the time I invite you for questions to the planning officer. Councillor Fox.
Just one small thing, and forgive me, officers, if you've already raised this. One of the objections was in relation to discharge of fumes. I presume we're talking about chlorine. And I think, if I've got it right, in fact, there'll be a reduction rather than an increase as a result of this application. But I just wonder if you could put my mind at rest on a whole question of fumes.
The pool already operates as it is, and it's expected that all pools emit a certain amount of chlorine, but this is a new system, so I have new filters and everything else in place, so I believe it's at a low level.
Councillor Billings.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered whether, for the purpose of trying to reassure some of the objectors, we could assist a little bit by turning to the level of noise. We've got the calculations that have been done in relation to 18.5 decibels. I was just wondering if we could contextualise that a bit more. We've said here that it's equivalent to a whispered conversation. Could you assist me by what we'd expect background levels of noise to be anyway? When I've seen this come forward in relation to a planning application in my ward, I think the assessment was that background noise on what was a very quiet road was something in the order of 25 decibels. Does that sound about right? Could you help me a little bit by what we think background noise is anyway? Thank you.
I'm not going to comment on background noise as a father of 2 sons, 5 and 8, and the whole school operating fully with children. So yeah, in terms of a quiet street versus a school versus a house, right in the centre of a building at that upper level, yeah, I think you're probably right in terms of the decibel levels, but it should be really insignificant compared to the neighbours. And I'll leave my comments on the noise of children for another time.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Okay, I'll move to debate time. Councillor Penny.
Chair, I absolutely can't see anything wrong with this application, so I'm just going to propose, through you, Chair, approval as per the recommendation in the officer's report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Penny. Councillor Billings.
I entirely agree. I'd really try and reassure the residents that are worried about noise that the background noise levels are probably higher than the calculated amount that this will increase them at their rear garden fence, and then there's still the distance between that fence and their rear boundary of their property. I would suggest, colleagues, the only reason we're considering this is because this is on a council-owned asset. If it wasn't, this would have been already approved under delegated powers, so I'd be delighted to second as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, my little bit of comment. I mean, Mayfield School's an absolute gem in the Bay. I mean, the sterling job they do, and this is a hydrotherapy pool. Therapy being the word, you know, if it's not working, the children in our greatest need don't get the therapy that they need. So having reassured the objectors and residents, got a proposer, got a seconder, all those in favour?
That's
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Is that the end? Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, we're not doing the... Yeah. So I call the meeting to a close.